If you're not familiar with the Xbox Adaptive Controller, that's it in the center. It's basically, on the inside, it's a Xbox controller. The console sees it as a wireless controller. The only difference is, instead of all of the buttons that are on a normal controller, it has a row of headphone jacks on the back that allow you to plug in any different combination of buttons that you want to assemble your own rig, customize it to the way that you play, and do it in a much more affordable way than you can do now. Because there are ways you can achieve this, or there are ways that you can play games with limited mobility. They're really expensive. We wanted to make that more accessible to a broader audience. Like I said, I've never, or maybe I didn't say this, I've never moderated a panel before, so. This is the part where we're going to do introductions. I'm Chris Kujawski. I'm an industrial designer for the device team. I've worked at Microsoft for over 10 years doing mainly input handheld accessories, so like the Xbox Elite controller, the One S controller, a bunch of mice and keyboards, things like that. And I worked on the adaptive controller for a couple of years as it took many different shapes and iterations and all that until we finally announced it about a month and a half ago. And I'm fortunate to have a group of folks here that influenced the design of it and helped bring it to life, and they're going to do their own introductions.
Hi, I'm Andrew. So, I live here in New York. I work in television and film. But gave them play Xbox since I was in middle school. It was a long time ago. I've been using the adaptive controller for a few months and seeing what the best functionality is. And I'm sure I'll talk about that more in depth. But,
Hi, I'm Erin. I've been playing games since I was little. I started on the Atari, and then now I game on PC, and I helped playtest the adaptive controller, and yeah, so.
I'm Richard Ellenson. I'm the CEO of the Cerebral Palsy Foundation. You might have seen some of our work. If any of you ever saw the video, Zach Anner and the Quest for the Rainbow Bagel about accessibility in New York, or the Just Say Hi celebrity campaign, that's some of the social media work we do. We do a lot of other research as well. I have been involved with this project almost for a decade, really, when the Connect first came out, advocating and working with some of the great folks at Microsoft in terms of envisioning how people with disabilities can play games and become a gamer like everybody else and do it the right way. So it's a remarkable joy to have seen this evolve and to have been knowing about this for a couple of years and to sort of work with some of the people who've been testing it. I'm also the father of son Tom, who is 20 years old right now, just graduated high school in New York City, and got into SUNY Purchase in the theater department, which is pretty cool. Tom has CP, he's nonverbal, he's in a wheelchair. And I guess thirdly, about a decade ago, I created some assistive technology called the Tango, which was a speech device. So I've been very involved in assistive technology for quite some time. And as everyone was doing their introductions, I just all of a sudden remembered being at Cornell University for a summer program and playing this really cool thing called Pong. So I'm actually maybe one of the few people in the room who actually got to play that thing when it first came out. So it's particularly exciting to be here and to see how many more people can play things that are way cooler than Pong.
I didn't know you did the Rainbow Bagel video. That was good. So why are we here? We're going to talk about I'm going to talk about the industrial design of the project. I'm an industrial designer. Give you a little bit of a product tour, talk about why we made it, and then these guys are going to share their experiences with it. But starting with, I want to start with why We made it. This is a standard Xbox controller. People who work on Xbox controllers think this is the best Xbox controller, or this is the best controller you can play games with. And a lot of other people think that. Not everybody, but we take a lot of pride in the design of this and all the work that went into it. A couple years ago, as the idea for the adaptive controller was growing, I kind of had a shift in my perception of this, and I realized that although this is a great controller for some people, it's actually the thing that prevents some people from playing Xbox games. So this takes a lot of assumptions into account. It assumes you have two hands to hold it, you can hold it for a long time, that you have very fine motor control with your fingers, that you have the dexterity to press the buttons quickly and in rapid sequence. And that's not the case for everybody who wants to play games or Xbox games. And so the idea of creating a way, a first-party way, an Xbox product that was built to work on the Xbox platform that enabled more people to play was the idea behind this controller. I have a couple of them here. I'm going to pass them around. If you haven't seen one, and you probably haven't because it's not out yet. I'm gonna do two. Go this way. This one, I didn't sign it. Shaquem Griffin signed it. He was the Seattle Seahawks draft pick this year. He's missing one hand. He's an incredible gamer. We set him up with one of these. So he's an incredible gamer with one hand. He's been playing games his whole life. He has a system that works for him. I had the opportunity to set up a rig for him for a demo in the Microsoft Store a couple of weeks ago, and he immediately dominated me in Madden without like learning anything on the controller. Like he's a good gamer. But I think it kind of speaks to the flexibility of the product, and that was one of the original tenets of the device, because you can't design a piece of assistive technology for one use case. I mean, you could. It would have worked for a couple people, but we have a pretty big audience, and so we wanted to make this as flexible as possible for as many gamers as possible, and for all the different types of ways that people play. Andrew and Erin are going to talk now about their experience with it. They were both part of our take-home testing group. That was a really important part of the development of this program, because we know how to make an Xbox controller really well on a console, but we've never made anything like this before, and so we needed some experts to tell us, basically call us, on our BS when we made an assumption, because this is the way we always did it, and they're like, no guys. So that was a super important part of the development, and I'm hoping you guys can talk a little bit about your experience with the controller and the prototypes.
Sure. So the way I play Xbox and the way I also do all my work, since my cerebral palsy affects my ability to move my fingers, normally I use my feet to operate the controller and play all my videos. I've been doing that way on a normal controller. I put it on my yoga mat. People think I do yoga when they come from half-helmet. No, it's just for my Xbox. So when the device came along, I'm like, oh great, this seems like a very innovative place, because I've been trying to figure out how I can play my game more effectively, because the biggest challenge is because the buttons are so close together, I end up pressing the wrong button from America have disastrous outcomes when you play again, if anyone knows. So yeah, so I got the device, I put it on the floor, and you know, I moved all the big buttons, as you can see, quite large. I also got a couple different switches because on the way the device works is an input on the back of the device so you can plug in different switches and buttons and all kinds of other accessories. So I set up about 5 buttons to get the buttons that I use the most. And I know there's no gesture, so that might be a bit of a problem when you're moving the chapter in the game. So this device solves one problem, which is the button something else, but we're still working on solving a problem to allow better control. Because the way I adapted was using the co-pilot feature on the Xbox. I use a normal controller on the bottom of the device, and the accessible device is above. I have a picture of the camera, so that lets me have full control of all the functionality. But I couldn't, unfortunately, for me, it takes a lot of movement, so I compare playing every game is like playing Dance Revolution all the time. So, but yeah, it's a good step in the right direction in terms of accessibility. And, you know, it can only get better from here. So, you know, it can't get any worse from where it was 10 years ago. So,
that does make it a little bit easier for us. I wish we had the picture that he showed me of his setup with 2 XACs, the foot pedals, and the co-piloted. If you're not familiar with co-pilot, it's a way that you can link 2 controllers together to act as one. So he uses co-pilot for the thumbstick, and then Dance Revolutions himself around the rest of the foot pedals there. But it's awesome, and that's not at all what we had in mind when we were designing this, and which is fantastic, because like that's why you send it out to people who will set it up the way that they want to set it up, and figure out like how to hack it together, which is pretty cool. Erin?
Okay, so for me, I'm gonna be very honest. I've never played on Xbox at all.
Can you please leave? I didn't know that.
There is a reason, and for me, I used to play, as I said, on Atari, on PlayStation, Nintendo, And then as my disability progressed, I could no longer play on those devices. So now I game on PC, and when the Xbox adaptive controller came out, I was able to let me play on a console again. So it opens up a lot of opportunities to be social. Yeah, and for me, I use different switches on the Xbox controller, and I use Copilot as well. Yeah.
So I don't have issues as a person with disabilities. My son does. And interestingly, my son actually, thanks. Although he has used this, he turned off to gaming when he was young because there was no controller for him. And he got into Broadway, where he can have the experience we have by just sitting in a chair and watching. And so I want to talk just a little bit about shared human experience, because what's really interesting is accessibility is not always understood. And if we're here about games for change, the notion is how do we create real life experience in games, and how do we inform through games? This is sort of a different question. This is the world of gaming exists, but it's not accessible to everybody. So we actually did some research on this with Microsoft, but the research we did was on what happens to a child when he doesn't get to participate in a shared social experience. And that is exactly what happens. What happens to a child who every time he gets together with his friends, he's the one who has to sit in the corner and watch them play the game, as opposed to playing it. And if I played against a really good gamer, I would get creamed, but I would still have a great time playing. Doesn't matter. So, and one of the issues in the world of disability is we try to make, perfection is the enemy of excellence. And we try to make everything perfect and yada yada, as opposed to just shared human experience. What's so wonderful about this is the biggest issue in disability, one of the biggest issues, the biggest issue is just misperception. But disability is varied. There's sight issues, there's hearing issues, there's physical issues, there's access issues. In some people with cerebral palsy, one side of your body works, the other doesn't. In some people with disabilities, both arms don't work. Some people, if it's a leg problem, and you wouldn't even know you had cerebral palsy until you got up. So how do we create a controller that will let everybody do everything? And so the question is, how do you nuance the balance between offering enough that anybody can get access to the experience we all have, but not provide so much that you're initially confronted by a perception of this is too hard for me. And then there's even another issue, because most technology that's been made for people with disabilities has been made by mom and pops. It's been substandard, it breaks, and as a community, we have been, my son and other people with disabilities have been trained that this stuff won't work, that it's disappointment after disappointment is disappointment. So how do we provide something that will not only eventually provide access, but provide a strong enough belief of engagement through its industrial design that will be able to make it happen? So, what Microsoft has done in making this is to acknowledge it and play that nuance and get pretty close to the target. A really, really tough job in a market that, guys, this just has not been done. It's amazing. And to commit to mass manufacturing something for a market this size has not been done. And even if you look at it, someone's holding it, but if you look at the bottom, you've got 3 screw holes there, which allows you to have 3 different ways to mount this, because some people need it mounted on a wheelchair. Every single button there can be done differently. So some people just will be hitting. Some people use a head switch. There are things that you put in the top of your mouth that have little metal plates in it, and with your tongue you can hit different buttons. All of those can be put into this. Eye movement, head movement, any accessible switch it's having can go into this thing. So what's really super exciting about this is when you see somebody in a wheelchair doing something different, playing a game, it will initially look different. But eventually, you stop watching the interface and you start watching the game. And you get into the same mindset. So what this device has provided is not only access to technology, but access to shared human experience, access to fun, access to friendship, and access to social engagement. And that's what this is all about. And that is world-changing.
Yeah, thank you. And I on that point, I kind of want to come back to something Erin mentioned about the shared social experience and the social aspect of playing games. And I was hoping maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. Whether this has changed it or not, I think that's an interesting topic that we don't necessarily think about when we're designing a product like this.
Yeah. So, growing up, I would play games with my brother all the time, and I haven't played a game with him in like 5 years, maybe, because I can no longer play on PlayStation, which is what we have. And he doesn't play on PC, so it's like, you know. But yeah, now that I have the Xbox controller, me and my brother are gonna buy an Xbox so we can finally play games together again. So yeah, and I think for me also, my friends, you know, who also play Xbox, we can play together. So it's definitely a big social aspect to it. It's not just about having fun, it's about having these shared experiences.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I've designed a lot of products for Microsoft. That aspect of this product, I think, is really different from a lot of the other input devices that I've designed that have been fun and have been cool, and you know, you get to work on cool stuff as a designer at Microsoft. But the whole process of designing this was a big learning experience for me, just because I hadn't considered that, and so, you know, the whole process of it has been a real like a growth opportunity for me, just as a designer and as a person. I've kind of learned through this, and I had a sense of it. I don't know if there's any, we're at Parsons Design School, I don't know if there's any design students here, but I think one of the most valuable skills you can have as a designer is being a good listener. You know, you don't usually get to design products for yourself, and so understanding what's actually important, what are the motivations of the customers that you're designing stuff for is really important. There is a traditional industrial design aspect to this too, and I was going to talk a little bit about that kind of in the form of a product tour, just to give you an idea of what we thought about, like as we were designing the product, and why is it this shape, you know? So like I mentioned before, and I think what you've heard here is that there is not one way to design something like this. You really need to design it to be as flexible as possible, and as adaptable as possible. The name of it, the adaptive controller, didn't come until like way at the end of the project. But we always had this sense of flexibility and the importance that you know, it needed to be simple, really easy to set up for either a player or a caregiver, somebody who was familiar or not familiar with Xbox, and that's one of the reasons why, if you look at the back of it, my slides are in order. Good. You look at the back of it. We have, for every button, there's basically a headphone jack or USB. If you just look at this, it's like, holy cow, there's a lot of complexity here. But we made a really conscious decision to split everything out, spread it out so that it was easy to plug any number of different controls in, any number of buttons, like on that first slide that was up there for a while. Those are all third-party buttons you can plug in. There's many more than that, but they will all fit in here. And we decided, we could have made this a lot smaller. I work on Surface products too. We'd never make a Surface like the next Pro thicker than it had to be, or like you never make it bigger than it has to be. But we consciously made the choice here to like spread everything out, give it some breathing room, make it simple to understand what all of these plugs do, where all the buttons go. It is I'm gonna go back. In that sense, it is a controller. It has all the same buttons. It obviously doesn't look anything like a controller. When you look at this, excuse me, it's a very traditionally ergonomic product. It's curvy. It's got places for your hands. The way that if you were to be able to grip that the way that we expect people to grip it, all the buttons are sort of right there. This is really different in that by putting all of those plugs on the back, it created a footprint that was fairly large. And so we thought, this is about the size of a console. We could think about it like a console. At the time, we were thinking about it like a breakout box. We use that term a lot. You could plug different buttons into it, set it up the way that you want. It's like something that people would put away. They'd plug stuff in, and then they'd use the buttons. The more that we learned about it, though, and I had some early prototypes that were like very architectural, very like simple, very rectilinear, the way you design a console. And we put those models in front of people, and they were like, dude, why are these edges like so sharp? I'm gonna put my hands right on here and like use these buttons all the time. And why is the front edge of it so high? For example, I have a hard time lifting my arms up. I can't hover over this button all the time. The buttons were bigger. They took up the whole top surface of the product too, because we're like, bigger buttons better. But what we didn't consider is that, for a lot of folks, they'll be resting their hands on the table, or they're resting their hands on the device and just rocking back and forth, or using smaller movements to actuate those big buttons. And so we added a slope to that front edge, and we added the right size radius, not a real big radius to make it look too soft, not a small radius so that it was still sharp, but it was industrial design world. We geek out on radii. It's just the right size. We knew it wouldn't cause any discomfort. So it's an ergonomic product in the sense that you interact with it with your hands, but it's much different than a traditional ergonomic product. I mentioned the size of the buttons shrank, although they're still quite large. We grew them in order to keep the white space between them, so that it's the right size. So you can average hand can rest between there, rock between them really easily. They're really light touch switches. So that it's easy to actuate. I was coming up here at the risk of this sounding like a Microsoft congratulations tour, like, man, we made this cool product. You guys came to see this. I did a great job. So I didn't want that to happen. The reason we do take homes and get feedback is to for us, for people to tell us what's wrong with it, so we can make it better. We took a lot of that feedback, like the slope that we added in the top, making the buttons the right size. What Erin told me I already knew, and I knew someone was going to ask about it, and I knew it was wrong. Like the D-pad, the plus-shaped button there, the switches are the same ones that we use in the standard controller, and they're really hard to hit, and that's a fail on this product. I think that there was a really good mechanical development reliability reason for doing it, but it's not the right decision for the customers that are using it, and so that's the kind of feedback that that I really like hearing. It's nice for somebody to pat you on the back, but I would much rather know what's wrong with something rather than assuming I did a great job. So we can do better this next time. And so I expect and I hope we're going to get a lot more feedback like that. As this gets out into the world. I'm referring back to my notes here. I usually do this while holding one of the controllers. Are those still out there somewhere? Okay, cool. I'm going to grab one and just talk a bit more. Richard mentioned the threaded inserts on the back. We did that obviously on purpose to make it really easy to mount to different things. One of the things that you'd never know, though, is that we, it's white. Our controller's white, but we made the bottom black on purpose because as we were kind of road showing this around and going to we went to Craig Hospital, which is in Denver, and they treat patients with spinal injuries or traumatic brain injuries. It's a rehabilitation hospital, and they use gaming as a big part of their rehabilitation. And so, they're like a perfect test bed for us to try stuff out on. They attach everything to everything with Velcro, like black Velcro. There's like black Velcro over everything. And so we took prototypes there, and they put black Velcro on the back of them, and I was like, man, that doesn't look that good. We got to make the bottom black and like make it blend in. And it's like, there were subtle things that we picked up on, like that you'd never know unless you put it out in the world and get feedback from it. And the other thing about the design of it is that, and I as a designer, the most important thing to me is that it looks like an Xbox product. Richard said, a lot of the products that are out in the space now are from mom and pop shops. A lot of them look like toys. You saw on this slide. Whoops. These were like the best looking ones we could find for our photo shoot. But there's a lot of like toy-like looking products. Not everyone wants. Not everyone is a kid that wants to have like bright green, bright yellow buttons, on their setup. We wanted this to look cool. We wanted people to want it, just like we want them to want our other products. And so designing this in the same colorway, in the same using the same form language, making the so that if you put this up next to an Xbox One S, there's no reason to do this, but it's the same width. It looks really good when you take a photo of it like that. I have a photo of it. It fits in with the family of products that we designed, and that is. It's important to me as a designer. Like, I'm not doing a good job if I'm not designing something that people want. But it took on an extra level of importance here because it's just an underserved area. There's not like a ton of cool assistive technology products. Like it's often seen as an afterthought, and we wanted to be really conscious about making this like a cool product that people wanted and that fit in with the rest of their Xbox products. And I was hoping Richard could talk a little bit more about that, and he's more familiar with the big range of assistive technology products out there, having developed one himself. And then Andrew and Erin can hopefully add some color to that conversation as well. Yeah. Whoever can go first. I don't have a plan.
The ability to create something that is needed is really at the heart of what assistive technology is about. And so many people start with technology, not with what the user experience is. And again, even if you think about what games are, most people say, this is my hardware, this is my platform. How am I going to create something for that platform? As opposed to, how do I expand that platform so other people can be brought together through it? And I think that's at that heart of that thought. And I think that, today, some of the deepest relationships we have as human beings, oddly enough, are with our technology. I mean, this is so apparent, it's trite. But when you leave out here today, stand outside of a subway and see how many people are coming up the stairs with their phone. It's ridiculous what's going on. And the experiences you have, I've always wondered, actually, is there a biochemical difference between watching the funeral of a loved one and watching someone's funeral in a movie? I sometimes think that, I know one lasts longer, but my guess is that if you did a functional MRI, you'd find something very, very similar, which is really weird. So So the competitive aspect of gaming, gaming is about fantasy, right? It's about doing things. It's about not dying. It's about being able to beat people up. It's being able to do this stuff. And think of this, you're doing it by this. Right? You're moving your thumb around, and you're moving around these worlds. So someone else is doing it in that world. So how do you create the technology that doesn't stand in the way of the reality of your fantasy? I think I have a funny feeling the last word I'm going to be saying today will be fantasy, as I head out to that's a tell. Andrew?
I know about you saying
G knows all about them, but he's not going to talk about that today.
Now I need the main play about have been part of my life, and all my friends play about, and my goal was always to find something that would let me play my game effectively and efficiently and with my friends. And I tried something different things. I tried this large controller. It was like $900. It broke within the first 2 days of me being able to do this stuff. It's gotta be a better way to do it. It's really about, playing since I play with my feet. That's one way. But everyone plays a different way. So she plays a different way than I play. So it's really, you're not gonna make something that will be suitable for everyone, but it's all about making something that, is on the ground, but at the ground level, people can build on and, find a way to do what they're trying to do with the, console creation, That's what, at the end of the day, it's all about having fun, If you're not having fun, play again.
Yeah. So, for me, technology is such a big part of how we interact with each other that when you cut off disabled people from technology, you're cutting out disabled people from society. So for me, it's important to have games accessible so we can be part of society. And a lot of people might not think gaming is a big deal, but it isn't. It's very important that we, are part of the gaming community.
I just sort of build on that, as the guy who runs the Cerebral Palsy Foundation, it's really important not only that we provide access to gaming, but also provide access to society. That's why we're all here. And we have a campaign. William H. Macy was the voiceover for Microsoft for a while. and I got to know him, and he did our very first campaign. And the campaign is, how do you start a conversation with someone who has a disability? He sits here and he looks up and he goes, hi. And we've gotten so many people who do that. To someone who has disabilities, the fact that you need to do this commercial is crazy, you know? And it's not really just say hi, it's just say hi and go from there. But, you know, one thing I would ask everybody in this room is, you know, if you're in this building today, you're here for the right reasons, but be our advocates, share this message, share it not only about gaming, but about elevators, share it about carpools, share it about summer camps, and share that when you look through a game, you see a level of equality, you see a level of, you know, humanity, oddly enough, that may not be there in the world as easily for some people. So, you know, be our advocates in this world, you know, get to a point where you have someone like Pilkington come up to you and go, you know, Ellenson, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're a dope, and then you'll know you've made it. So thanks.
What people on gaming, if you ever play online, people can get some people more polite than others. But yeah, would say I play a lot of people online, and you know, one big game I must play is Madden football, because it doesn't require a lot of simultaneous buttons. You know, my right foot is more mobile than my left foot, so if I'm not like a chimpanzee super feel, so that's why I think people online. I win more than I was back over, and if I only knew there's not someone who's playing with this team, they would be so much more mad. I only and like, that's the whole experience that I, you know, enjoy and you know, it's really important to try to, you know, have that way, you know, level of equality. It's like, I'm not gonna go out and like shoot a basketball, but I have my guy on NBA 2K19. Maybe look at me freak out if I know, I have my guy play basketball. Be really good. So like, you know, this is, you know, that fancy. And you know, that's my opportunity to play sports against my able-bodied friends who, you know, play with real sports. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother and my father played hockey, and obviously I can't play hockey, so I would play NHL 94 with them, and it was a way for me to play, you know, hockey on the PlayStation, I think it was. And also, I play Overwatch a lot, every day. And one time, I was playing, and I made a mistake, and I messed up. And one of the other, someone on the other team said in the chat, what, are you disabled? Why did you do that? So then, after the game, our team won. And I said, yes, I am disabled. Asshole. So yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. The true measure of equality was you get the good game and the FUs in equal measure. We only have a couple minutes left. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions if anybody has some for anyone up here. Yes?
For Microsoft as a whole, for families and caregivers, there's always this having to jury rig and hack things to make it work to fit specific sets of needs. Are there plans or things in the works to help build communities, design maybe mounts or additional input devices or stuff like this around the adaptive control?
Yes. I don't know how much of the website is live now. The pre-order site's up, but a big part of the effort in launching this was making sure that there was all that supporting material about how do you set this up? Where do you go to buy all of those buttons that are on that first page? And that will all be a part of the online story. I know the marketing team and the third-party teams have worked a ton with our suppliers and the folks that make these products, because we can't make everything and get it out all at the same time. So we wanted to make sure that it was all there and it was all in one place, so you knew where to go, and there was support there to help set up. And I think we're probably going to learn a lot as we go. We're not sure how this is going to go, and so hopefully we're gonna get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I'll also just say that one of the projects we're doing with Microsoft is that the 80-20 rule. There's for different hemiplegia, diplegia, quadriplegia, there will be different recommended setups for things, and there are so many choices that are out there. But we will be coming up with sheets which are based on certain physical aspects and recommending different specific button setups and things like that will help people. So I'm sure we won't get them exact, but I think we'll get them 90%. And I think that's going to be a real, and again, that's what you get when you have a company like Microsoft who's willing to work with foundations who have so much time that we spend with people to understand that parents can't figure this out themselves.
I talked with Microsoft this story on this when it was announced, and they're saying that they're not making any money on this thing, so it's $100.
It's $100, yeah.
So maybe you can be able to speak to this on the design side, but you're saying that already there's some stuff that you want to improve on, like the defect, right? Is this something where you think the company would have like the traditional kind of refresh product cycle with when you take the learnings from the community and maybe release a new version of the future?
This is the part where I tell you we can't comment on things that we're working on that aren't released yet. There's nothing, there were very few things that were normal about the development of this. It was a totally new type of product, and so everybody who worked on it expects that we're going to get a lot of feedback, and there'll be things to improve. And I would just say look out in the future. I think we're all going to learn a lot about this, and there's going to be people that hack, take it apart, make it their own, and that's going to be a big part of the story. Yes. So the question was about programming macros. As a general stance, Xbox is very sensitive about anything that could be perceived as cheating. The level playing field is a super important part of playing on the Xbox platform, and so although historically that's a big, it's a part of PC gaming, I think that's one thing. There's not a way to do that. It basically acts as a controller. It's the same as the console sees it as a controller, and so there's not a way to do that. I think it's a little bit, it's a more difficult topic than just saying we don't allow cheating, we don't allow that, because I think there are so many different circumstances. I don't know that that's going to change anytime, but I think it's certainly something that's been brought up because it is there's just a lot of different circumstances.
As one of the panelists already mentioned, the other companies build products that we fall apart or get broken. Knowing that wear and tear on a product like this is so much different than a regular controller, how is Microsoft addressing that for the people that are using it? Putting on the Velcro, unscrewing things, mounting it, or just their general wear and tear may look different.
Yeah, that's a great point that all of our reliability engineers were super worried about during the development of this. There might be a video, probably on YouTube if you looked for it. I think we did a tour of our reliability lab, but part of the decision to add the slope to the top of it to make it easier to put your hands up on, part of that conversation was like, oh, it makes it really easier to use your feet on it. And everyone was like, oh crap, do you think people are going to use their feet on it? And we're like, yeah, probably. Yes. And so, they panicked for a while, and then I think they did their due diligence to understand that, you push 10,000 times on this and it can't break, so you better engineer it like that. So I think as much or more effort went into the reliability on this product as any of our products, which are tested very, very thoroughly. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, on your computer, I can't tell you how many normal computers I've broken by the few, click them up. When you play Call of Duty, you have to press a button very quickly but no, like your wear tear, is really a big thing. It's on the ground. Your arm has more violent movement, I so you can't have like that, doing that every day. That can really mess up your employee. So having it be durable, but it's a really important factor. Yeah. The good thing about it is you can't swallow it when you lose.
I got the 2-minute warning. Maybe another question.
I'm a teacher, and I see this being, in a very good way, very disruptive to the assistive technology world in education, because it will make a lot of those one-use devices that don't have a lot of permanence or relevance across multiples. It will work for that, for those response devices and things, because of the way that y'all set it up, and that's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the idea. All right. Well, thank you. I think I'll be around here for a little while. I've got another presentation I think right now, but I'll be around if you got any other questions. Find me. Well, my email's probably. It would have been a good idea to put it up there, but you know my name. Just look me. You can look me up on the program and send me any questions you have or anything, any suggestions. Good idea. This is a bad idea. Tell me what you think. So thank you very much.